I learned something about absence the day I saw 3 empty chairs with my family's name on them. They were in the front row. Center section. Reserved weeks in advance. And somehow, they still managed to disappear. My phone lit up 5 minutes before I was supposed to walk on stage. A notification. Just one. I should have ignored it. I didn't. It was my sister's Instagram story. Aspen, Colorado. Snow falling behind a glass window. A fireplace glowing like something out of a catalog. My mother was smiling. My father had a glass raised. My sister leaned into a man I had met twice. Her boyfriend. The caption said, "Best birthday weekend ever." I looked at the photo longer than I needed to. Not because it surprised me. Because it confirmed something I had been carefully not saying out loud for years. 3 chairs. All empty. My name is Tige Monroe. I just finished my PhD at MIT. Neuroscience. Early detection models. Patterns most people miss. That is what I do. I notice things. Small things. Like how my mother always says, "Of course we'll be there," in a tone that sounds complete until you realize it isn't. Like how my father nods instead of answering, as if agreement without commitment still counts. Like how my sister never asks if I mind. She just assumes I don't. I adjusted the sleeve of my gown and locked my phone. The hallway behind the stage was quiet. Too quiet for a day that was supposed to mean something. People always imagine these moments as loud. Applause. Cameras. Families leaning forward in their seats. Mine had 3 empty chairs and a photo from a ski resort. A week ago, I called my mother. I remember the exact spot I was standing in my apartment. By the kitchen counter. My coffee had gone cold. "Mom, I reserved 3 seats in the front row," I said. She sounded pleased. Warm. "Of course you did, honey. We wouldn't miss it." I almost asked her to promise. I didn't. I have learned that promises, in my family, are more like suggestions. My sister, Lila, has always been the center of gravity. Not in a dramatic way. In a quiet, consistent way. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself. It just happens. When she graduated high school, my parents hosted a 2-day celebration. Tents. Catering. A speech from my father that made people cry. When I graduated, we had dinner. A nice dinner. My mother called it intimate. I called it efficient. I never complained. That would have required me to believe the situation could change. Instead, I adapted. I smiled. I said thank you. I became easy to be proud of and even easier to overlook. A coordinator tapped lightly on the door. "Tige, we're ready for you in a few minutes." I nodded. "Thank you." My voice came out steady. It always does. That's the thing about getting used to disappointment. You learn how to carry it without spilling. I reached into my folder and pulled out my speech. Printed. Highlighted. Practiced. It was perfect. Safe. The kind of speech that makes people clap at the right moments and forget it by dinner. I held it in my hands and thought about the photo again. The fireplace. The laughter. The way my seat had been replaced by someone else's birthday. I smiled. Not the kind of smile people notice. The kind that stays small. Controlled. Well, I whispered to no one in particular, at least they picked a nice weekend to miss me. I folded the paper once. Slowly. Deliberately. The edges lined up perfectly. They always do when I'm paying attention. And I am always paying attention. I did not tear the speech. That would have been dramatic. And I have never been a dramatic person. I just held it there for a second longer than necessary, feeling the weight of words I was no longer going to say, then I placed it back into the folder as if it still mattered. The paper made a soft sound when it slid in. Clean. Final. The kind of sound that closes something without announcing it. I stepped closer to the curtain and looked out again. Rows of families. Cameras ready. Mothers leaning into their children. Fathers adjusting collars. People who showed up. I counted the chairs in the front row without meaning to. 1, 2, 3. Mine were still empty. No jackets draped over them. No bags. No last-minute rush. Just 3 small white cards that said reserved for family, like a quiet joke that no one else could hear. You okay? The voice came from my left. I turned. It was Dr. Elaine Porter. My advisor. 62 years old. Sharp eyes. Steady voice. The kind of person who does not waste words and does not miss much. She had been standing in that same spot for years, watching students walk into moments that mattered. She glanced toward the front row, then back at me. I did not follow her gaze. I did not need to. I am exactly where I am supposed to be, I said. It was not a lie. It just was not the full story. She studied my face for a second longer than most people would. Then she nodded. Good, she said. Because you earned this. Earned. I almost smiled at that word. It sounded clean. Measurable. Like something you could calculate. Effort in. Result out. I have spent years in systems that work like that. Data sets. Models. Predictions. You adjust variables, and outcomes shift. Families are not like that. You can do everything right and still end up with 3 empty chairs. I adjusted the edge of my sleeve again. The fabric felt heavier now. Or maybe I was just more aware of it. Behind me, someone laughed. A quick, bright sound. Another family. Another moment. I thought about calling my mother. Just once. Not to ask where she was. I already knew. Not to ask why. I had learned that question rarely gets answered. I thought about calling just to hear her voice say something that sounded like effort. Something that sounded like she tried. I did not. Some conversations do not give you closure. They just give you more material to carry. My phone buzzed again in my hand. Another message. Not from my parents. Not from my sister. A text from Lila finally came through. Short. Casual. Hey, service is bad here. We will celebrate you when we get back. I read it twice. The words were polite. Thoughtful, even. On the surface. Underneath, they said something else. They said this moment was flexible. Replaceable. Something that could be moved to a more convenient time. I typed a response. Have a great weekend. I stared at it. Then I added, stay warm. I hit send before I could edit it into something smaller. Kinder. Less honest. The coordinator stepped closer. Tige, we are starting. I nodded again. Always nodding. Always. Understanding. That has been my role for as long as I can remember. The one who adjusts. The one who does not make things complicated. The one who knows how to read a room and choose silence when it matters. I took a breath. Slow. Controlled. The way I do before presenting data. Before defending a model. Before saying something that needs to land exactly where I intend it to. I reached into the folder one last time. Not for the speech. For the small card tucked behind it. Notes I had written weeks ago. Not for the audience. For myself. A reminder of why I started. Why I stayed. Why I finished. I looked at the first line. Then I closed the folder. Ready, I said. Not to anyone in particular. Just to the space in front of me. Just to the version of me that had spent years preparing for a moment that arrived without the people she thought would be there. The curtain began to shift. Light spilled through the opening. Applause started somewhere in the room and grew. I stepped forward. Not fast. Not slow. Just steady. The way you walk when you know exactly what is missing and decide, very quietly, to move anyway. I walked into the light and for a moment everything felt exactly the way it was supposed to feel. Applause. Cameras lifting. Names being called with careful precision. The stage was larger than it looked from the hallway. Warmer, too. The kind of warmth that makes people believe they are being seen. I stepped up to the podium and placed both hands on either side of it. Solid. Polished wood. Something steady to hold on to. I looked out across the room. Rows of faces blurred together at first. Then they sharpened. Families leaning forward. Smiles ready. Eyes focused on someone they had come to celebrate. My eyes moved without permission. Front row. Center. 3 chairs. Still empty. I let the silence sit for half a second longer than usual. Not enough for anyone else to notice. Just enough for me. Good afternoon, I said. My voice carried clean. Even. Years of presentations had trained it well. My name is Tige Monroe. A few heads nodded. A few people clapped lightly. I continued. I was told this moment would feel big. A small pause. They were right. A few polite smiles. I could feel the rhythm of the room. Predictable. Safe. I reached into my folder and pulled out the speech. The printed pages were exactly where I left them. Perfectly aligned. Highlighted. Practiced. I held them up for a second. Then I set them down on the podium without looking at them. I wrote something for today, I said. It was thoughtful. Structured. Approved by every version of me that prefers things to stay uncomplicated. A soft ripple of laughter moved through the room. Gentle. Encouraging. I nodded slightly. But standing here now, I realized something. I let my eyes move again. Not quickly. Deliberately. Across the rows. Across the faces. And back to those 3 chairs. Some moments do not need to be perfect. I rested my hands flat against the podium. They need to be honest. The room shifted. It was subtle. The way a room changes when it senses something real is about to happen. Not louder. Just more attentive. I took a breath. Slow. Measured. I have spent most of my life being very easy to support, I said. I worked hard. I stayed quiet. I made sure that no one ever had to choose between me and something more convenient. A few people exchanged glances. Not uncomfortable. Curious. I continued before the moment could settle too deeply. It is a useful skill, I added lightly. Being low maintenance. A small laugh. Controlled. Then stillness again. You become very good at understanding people, I said. You learn what they mean even when they do not say it. I looked down briefly at the edge of the podium. My fingers traced a faint line in the wood. You learn that when someone says, "Of course we will be there," what they sometimes mean is, "We will try." And when they say, "We will celebrate later," what they often mean is, "This is not the moment we choose." The room was quiet now. Fully quiet. Not uncomfortable. Focused. I lifted my head again. I used to think that if I did everything right, I would become the moment people would not want to miss. I smiled slightly. Not bitter. Just clear. Turns out, that is not how it works. A pause. Just long enough. But here is what I learned instead. I straightened just a fraction. You can spend years waiting to be chosen, I said. Or you can decide that being here, exactly as you are, is already enough. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. The words landed the way they were supposed to. I glanced once more toward the front row. The chairs had not changed. Of course they had not. But something else had. Not the room. Not the moment. Me. So today, I said gently, I am not going to talk about achievement. I rested my hands again. Steady. Certain. I am going to talk about showing up. I let that word sit for a moment. Showing up. It sounds simple when you say it out loud. Like something that should not need explaining. Like something that should not need to be earned. But it does. Showing up is not loud, I said. It does not always come with applause. Most of the time, it looks like small things done consistently, without anyone keeping score. I shifted my weight slightly, grounding myself behind the podium. It looks like a parent sitting through a school play they do not understand. It looks like a text that says, I am here, and actually meaning it. It looks like choosing to be present, even when something else seems easier. The room stayed quiet. Not heavy. Just attentive. I continued, letting my voice stay calm. I learned early that not every seat that is reserved gets filled. A few people smiled faintly. Not because it was funny. Because they understood. At first, I thought that meant I needed to do more, I said. Be better. Be clearer. Be easier to show up for. I paused, just briefly. So I did. I let that settle before continuing. I worked harder. I made things simpler. I removed any reason someone might have to choose something else over me. I glanced down at my hands, then back up. And for a while, it worked. I became dependable. Predictable. Appreciated. A small nod. But appreciation is not the same as presence. The words landed softly, but they stayed. There is a difference between someone being proud of you, and someone being there for you, I added. They sound similar. They feel very different. I let a small breath out through a smile. I say that with a lot of respect, I continued. Because people do the best they can with what they know. And sometimes, what they know is not enough. A few heads lowered slightly. Not in discomfort. In recognition. I do not think anyone wakes up and decides to miss the moments that matter, I said. I think they tell themselves there will be another one. I let that line sit longer. It deserved it. Another weekend. Another celebration. Another time to make it right. I tilted my head just slightly. But moments like this do not repeat. The room held that truth quietly. You cannot reschedule a finish line, I said. You cross it once. I rested my hands again on the podium. Steady. And when you do, you look up, I continued, not to count who is missing, but to understand who is there. My eyes moved, not searching, just acknowledging. Rows of faces. Strangers. Supporters. Witnesses. That is something I did not understand before, I said. I thought the value of a moment came from who was expected to be in it. I shook my head gently. It does not. A soft pause. It comes from who chooses to stand with you, exactly when it happens. I let the words breathe. Then I added, quieter now, and sometimes, that person is you. The silence that followed was different. Not empty. Full. I did not rush to fill it. I did not need to. I simply stood there, hands steady, voice calm, letting the room absorb what I had just said. Then I looked once more toward the front row. 3 chairs. Still empty. Still untouched. I nodded slightly, almost to myself. So today, I said, I am choosing to show up for this moment, completely. A small shift in my tone. Not louder. Clearer. Not because everything is perfect, I added. but because it matters. I straightened just a fraction more. And that, I said, is enough. I did not step away from the podium right away. Most people do after a line like that. They let the applause carry them out. I stayed. Just for a second longer. Long enough to feel the weight of the moment settle into something real. Then the applause came. It started somewhere in the middle rows. One pair of hands. Then another. Then the sound spread outward, building in layers, filling the space that had been quiet just seconds before. It was not loud at first. It was steady. Intentional. The kind of applause that does not rush. The kind that listens before it responds. I nodded once. Not too much. Just enough to acknowledge it. I stepped back from the microphone, but I did not turn immediately. My eyes moved across the room again, slower this time. Faces I did not know. People who had chosen to be here for someone else, and in this moment, they were also here for me. That mattered more than I expected it to. I let my gaze pass over the front row one more time. 3 empty chairs. Still untouched. Still waiting for people who had chosen something else. I did not feel the sharp edge I thought I would. No anger. No embarrassment. Just clarity. Clean and quiet. I turned and walked off stage the same way I walked on. Not fast. Not slow. Just steady. Behind the curtain, the noise softened immediately. Applause turned into echoes. Then into background. Then into silence again. The coordinator smiled at me as I stepped through. That was beautiful, she said. I nodded. Thank you. My voice stayed even. It always does. Dr. Porter was standing a few feet away. She did not clap. She did not need to. She looked at me the way she always does when something lands exactly where it is supposed to. Direct. Certain. You changed it, she said. Not a question. I gave a small smile. I adjusted it. She held my gaze for a second. Then she nodded once. Good adjustment. That was her version of approval. Precise. Measured. I appreciated it more than anything louder. My phone vibrated again in my hand. I did not check it right away. I knew what it would be. Delayed reactions. Messages that arrive after the moment has already passed. I slipped it into my pocket instead. There would be time for that later. Or maybe there would not. Either way, it did not need to happen now. Someone called my name from down the hallway. Another graduate. Smiling. Excited. Tige, that speech, he said, shaking his head slightly. That was different. I smiled politely. Different can be useful. He laughed. Yeah. It was. He hesitated for a second, then added, my parents cried. I tilted my head slightly. Then I am glad they were here. He paused. Just for a moment. He understood what I meant. He nodded once and walked off. I stood there for a second longer, letting the hallway settle around me. The sounds. The footsteps. The quiet conversations. Life moving forward exactly as it should. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. The screen lit up instantly. Messages stacked on top of each other. My sister again. 2 missed calls. A message from my mother. Short. We saw the video. Call us when you can. I read it once. Then again. The wording was careful. Neutral. Not defensive. Not apologetic. Just present. I stared at the message for a second longer than necessary. Then I locked the screen. Not out of anger. Not out of avoidance. Just timing. Some responses do not belong in hallways. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and took a slow breath. The air felt different now. Lighter. Not because anything had been fixed. Nothing had changed out there. 3 chairs were still empty. Aspen was still a plane ride away. But something had shifted here. Inside the space I actually controlled. I adjusted the edge of my gown one last time and started walking down the hallway toward the exit. Toward the rest of the day. Toward whatever came next. This time I did not look back. I stepped outside into the afternoon light and the first thing I noticed was how ordinary everything looked. The sky was clear. People were laughing. Cameras flashed in small bursts as families gathered for photos. Nothing in the world had shifted to match what had just happened inside that auditorium. Moments like that rarely do. They expand quietly, then settle into memory while everything else keeps moving. I walked down the steps slowly, holding the edge of my gown so I would not trip, not because I was distracted but because I was focused in a different way now. A group of graduates stood off to the right, taking pictures with their families. A mother adjusted her son's cap. A father wrapped an arm around his daughter's shoulders. I looked at them for a second, then looked away. Not because it hurt. Because I understood it. My phone vibrated again. This time. I took it out. 3 more messages. My mother. My father. My sister. The order felt intentional, even if it was not. My mother's message was longer this time. Tige, we did not realize the ceremony would be streamed. We just watched your speech. You sounded different. Please call me. I read it once. Then I opened my father's. 1 line. We are proud of you. No punctuation at the end. He never uses punctuation at the end. My sister's message came last. That was not fair, Tige. You made it sound like we did not care. I let out a small breath through my nose. Not quite a laugh. Not quite anything else. I typed nothing. Not yet. I slipped the phone back into my hand and kept walking. The gravel path under my shoes made a soft, steady sound. Step. 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 I found an empty bench near the edge of the campus lawn and sat down. The wood was warm from the sun. I placed my folder beside me and rested my hands on my lap. Still. Controlled. I took my phone out again. This time, I opened the video. Someone had already uploaded it. Of course they had. Moments like that travel faster than explanations. I watched myself on the screen. The same posture. The same steady voice. The same 3 empty chairs in the corner of the frame if you looked closely enough. I listened to the words again. Not as the person who said them. As someone hearing them for the first time. They sounded calm. Measured. Respectful. They also said exactly what they needed to say. Nothing more. Nothing less. I paused the video halfway through and looked up. The campus stretched out in front of me. People moving. Conversations overlapping. Life continuing without asking for permission. My phone buzzed again. A call this time. My mother. I watched it ring. Once. Twice. 3 times. I answered on the 4th. Hi, Mom. My voice was even. She exhaled softly on the other end. Tige, she said, and then paused. Just a second too long. We did not know it would be like that. I leaned back slightly against the bench. Like what? I asked. Not sharp. Just clear. The speech, she said. The way you said things. I nodded, even though she could not see me. I said what was true. Another pause. Longer this time. I could hear something shifting in her tone. Not defense. Not yet. Something closer to realization. We were going to celebrate with you when we got back, she said. I looked out across the lawn again. I know, I said. And I did. That is not the same, I added, gently. Silence. Not empty. Processing. My father's voice came into the background, faint but present. Is she on the phone? My mother covered the receiver slightly, then came back. Your father is here, she said. He wants to talk to you. I nodded again. Okay. There was a small shuffle, then my father's voice. Tige. Just my name. I waited. He cleared his throat quietly. We watched it, he said. I let the silence sit. He continued. You sounded like you did not need us there. I tilted my head slightly, considering that. I needed you there, I said. I just did not need you to understand that in order to finish. The line went quiet again. Not tense. Just still. Then my father spoke, softer this time. We should have been there. I closed my eyes for a second. Not to hold anything back. Just to register it. Yes, I said. Nothing more. Nothing less. I did not rush to fill the silence after my father said that. I let it sit between us, the way truth usually does when it finally arrives. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just there, waiting to be acknowledged. We should have been there, he repeated, quieter this time, as if saying it again might make it land differently. I looked out across the lawn, watching a family take pictures near a large oak tree. The mother adjusted her daughter's cap again, even though it was already straight. Small gestures. Repeated. Intentional. Yes, I said again, but softer now. Not to correct him. Just to confirm what we both already understood. There was a shift on the line. I could hear my mother moving closer, hear my sister's voice faint in the background, asking something that did not quite reach me. Then my mother came back on. Tige, she said, carefully, we did not think it would matter this much. I tilted my head slightly, considering her words. That is the part that matters, I replied. My voice stayed calm. Not sharp. Not cold. Just clear. It did. Another pause. I could almost hear her trying to reorganize something in her mind. We thought we could celebrate when we got back, she said again, repeating the same idea, but this time it sounded less certain. I nodded slowly. You could, I said. But that would be a different moment. I let that line settle before continuing. And I needed you in this one. The quiet that followed was heavier now. Not defensive. Not dismissive. Just honest. My sister's voice came through more clearly this time. Can I talk to her? She asked. There was a small shuffle, then her voice was on the line. Tige, she said quickly, a little too quickly, I did not know you were going to say all that. I smiled faintly, even though she could not see it. Neither did I said. She exhaled. It made us look bad, she added, softer now. I let that sit for a second. Not to argue. Not to correct. Just to understand. I did not say anything that was not true, I replied. My tone stayed even. She was quiet. Then she tried again. We were just trying to do both things, she said. His birthday and your graduation. I glanced down at my hands, then back out at the lawn. And you chose one, I said. Not accusing. Just naming it. She did not answer right away. When she did, her voice had changed. Slightly. I guess we did, she said. I nodded once. That is all I was pointing out. There was no edge in my voice. No need for one. The conversation had already moved past that. My mother came back on the line again. We can come see you tomorrow, she said, quickly, almost hopeful. We can fly back tonight if we have to. I closed my eyes for a brief second, letting the offer settle. Not rejecting it. Not accepting it immediately either. You do not have to rush, I said. I am still here. A pause. Then I added, gently, but next time there is a moment like this, do not plan around it. The line went quiet again. This time, it felt different. Not tense. Not uncertain. Just understood. My father spoke again in the background, then closer to the phone. There will be a next time, he said. I thought about that. About moments. About how many we assume we have. There might be, I said. But I will not wait for it to matter. Another silence. Shorter this time. My mother exhaled softly. We are proud of you, she said again, but now the words carried more weight. Less habit. More intention. I nodded, even though she could not see it. Thank you, I said. And this time, I meant it without adjusting it in my head. I ended the call a few seconds later, not abruptly, not slowly. Just at the point where nothing more needed to be said. I set my phone down beside me on the bench and looked out across the campus again. The same people. The same movement. The same afternoon light. Nothing had changed out there. But something had shifted in the space between what I used to expect and what I now understood. I picked up my folder, stood up, and brushed a small piece of dust from the sleeve of my gown. The fabric settled back into place easily. It always does when you stop pulling at it. I took one last look at the open lawn, then turned toward the path ahead. This time, the steps felt lighter. Not because anything had been fixed. Because something had been seen. And that was enough to keep walking. I did not go home right away. That would have been the old pattern. Finish the moment, carry it quietly, and return to something familiar without asking what it meant. Instead, I walked. Across the campus. Past the same buildings I had passed 100 times before. Brick walls. Glass doors. Benches that held late-night conversations and early morning decisions. Everything looked the same. It just did not feel the same. My phone stayed in my hand this time. Not because I was waiting for it to ring. Because I was no longer avoiding it. A few more messages came through. Friends. Classmates. People I had not spoken to in years. That was powerful. You said what we all think. Are you okay? I replied to some of them. Short answers. Thank you. I am good. I will call you later. The usual. Then one message stood out. Dr. Porter. Come by my office when you are ready. No punctuation. No extra words. Just an invitation. I smiled slightly. Some people know exactly when to show up. I turned toward the faculty building and made my way up the steps. The hallway inside was quiet, almost too quiet after everything outside. Her door was open. It always is. I knocked lightly anyway. She looked up from her desk. You took your time, she said. Not a complaint. An observation. I stepped inside. I wanted to understand the moment before I explained it, I replied. She nodded once. And what did you find? I leaned against the back of the chair across from her desk. That I spent a long time trying to earn something that was never structured to be given consistently. She watched me closely. Not judging. Just measuring the clarity of the answer. And now, she asked. I let out a small breath. Now I am not trying to earn it, I said. I am just noticing where it actually exists. She leaned back slightly. That is a better use of your time. I smiled. That is what I thought. She gestured toward the chair. Sit. I did. The room felt grounded. Books stacked neatly. Papers aligned. Everything in its place. I placed my folder on her desk without opening it. She glanced at it briefly. You did not use your notes, she said. No, I replied. I did not need them. She nodded again. You rarely do. That made me pause for half a second. Not because it surprised me. Because it confirmed something I had not said out loud before. She continued, your work has always been precise. Today, it was personal. That is a different kind of accuracy. I considered that. Then I said, it felt cleaner. She raised an eyebrow slightly. Cleaner? I nodded. No adjustments. No editing for comfort. She gave a small, almost invisible smile. That is usually when people listen. My phone buzzed again on the desk. I glanced at it. A message from my mother. A photo this time. The three of them. Sitting closer together than before. No champagne glasses now. No fireplace. Just a quiet table. The caption said, we are heading back tonight. I looked at the photo for a second longer than necessary. Not analyzing it. Just taking it in. Then I set the phone face down. Dr. Porter watched the movement. You are not going to answer? She asked. I shook my head slightly. Not yet. She nodded. Timing, she said. I smiled faintly. Exactly. There was a pause. Comfortable. Then she said, they will try to fix it quickly. I met her gaze. I know. And you? She asked. I thought about that for a moment. Not long. Just enough. I am not looking for a fix, I said. I am looking for consistency. She leaned back, satisfied. Good, she said. That is harder to fake. I nodded. We sat in silence for a few seconds. Not empty. Just complete. Then I stood up, picking up my folder. Thank you, I said. She waved it off lightly. You did the work. I turned toward the door, then paused. They are coming back tonight, I added. She did not look surprised. Of course they are. I rested my hand on the doorframe. I think they finally saw it, I said. She tilted her head slightly. The moment? I shook my head once. Me. That was the difference. I stepped out into the hallway again, the quiet following me for a few steps before the outside noise returned. My phone buzzed once more in my hand. I looked at it this time. My mother again. We will be there when you are ready. I read it once. Then I typed back. I am here. I hit send before I could change the wording. Then I slipped the phone into my pocket and kept walking. Not toward them. Not away from them. Just forward. The way you move when you are no longer trying to be chosen, but still open to being met halfway. I did not expect them to arrive that night. Not really. People say things in the moment, especially after they realize something important has already passed. But around 8:40 p.m., my phone lit up again. A simple message. We are here. No explanation. No extra words. Just presence. I stood still for a second, looking at the screen, letting the words settle the way everything else had settled that day. Then I picked up my keys and stepped outside. The air was cooler now. The campus quieter. The kind of quiet that comes after a day that has already said everything it needed to say. Their car was parked near the curb. Engine off. Lights off. Just there. I noticed that first. Not the car itself. The stillness of it. My mother stepped out. When she saw me, she did not wave. She did not call my name. She just stood there for a second, as if she was making sure I was actually in front of her and not on a screen. My father followed. Then my sister. The three of them. Together. No distractions. No schedule behind them. Just this moment. My mother walked toward me first. Slower than usual. Careful. Hi, she said. Her voice was softer than I had ever heard it. I nodded once. Hi, Mom. My father stayed a step behind her. Not distant. Just measured. My sister looked at me like she was trying to read something she had missed before. We stood there for a few seconds without filling the space. No one rushed it. That mattered more than anything they could have said quickly. My mother spoke again. We watched it again on the flight, she said. Twice. I tilted my head slightly. That is a long flight, I replied, lightly. A small smile touched her face. It did not last long, but it was real. We heard everything you said, she added. I nodded. I meant everything I said. My father stepped forward then. One step. Enough to close the distance he had been holding. We know, he said. His voice was steady, but there was something new in it. Not authority. Not distance. Something closer to respect. He looked at me directly. You were right. I did not rush to respond. I let the words sit, the same way he had learned to let silence sit earlier. Then I said, I was honest. He nodded. That too. My sister shifted slightly beside him. I did not think it would feel like that, she said. Watching it. I glanced at her. Most things feel different when you are not in the room, I said. She looked down for a second, then back up. I should have been, she admitted. I nodded once. Yes. No lecture. No layering. Just the truth, the way it had been all day. My mother took a small step closer. We cannot redo today, she said. I know that. I met her eyes. No, I said. You cannot. She exhaled slowly. But we are here now. I considered that. Not dismissing it. Not accepting it blindly either. Just placing it where it belonged. Yes, I said. You are. Another pause. Not uncomfortable. Just real. My father looked around the quiet campus, then back at me. We want to do better, he said. The sentence was simple. It did not try to fix everything at once. That mattered. I nodded slowly. Then do not wait for moments like today, I replied. Show up before they become important. He absorbed that. Not defensively. Thoughtfully. My sister gave a small, almost uncertain laugh. That sounds like work, she said. I smiled faintly. It is. She nodded. Okay. That was new too. Not agreement because it was expected. Agreement because it was understood. We stood there a little longer, the four of us, without needing to fill every second with words. No one checked their phone. No one looked away. Just presence. Simple. Undeniable. My mother reached out then, slowly, and touched my arm. Not pulling. Not holding. Just making contact. We are proud of you, she said again. This time it did not sound like a phrase she had used before. It sounded like something she had finally decided to mean. I nodded. Thank you. And I let it be enough. Not because everything was fixed. Not because the past had changed. But because this moment was not being postponed. I looked at the three of them, really looked this time, the way they had started to look at me. Not as someone who would always understand. Not as someone who would always wait. But as someone who had already moved forward and was choosing, carefully, to let them walk beside her. I am glad you are here, I said. Not soft. Not dramatic. Just true. And for the first time, no one treated that moment like something that could be rescheduled.